Today we're making a twisted bangle. So I want you to start with a piece of round wire 2.5 to 3 millimeter diameter, 420 millimeters long. Mark it in the middle. Take your parallel jaw pliers and put a fairly sharp bend in it. Then I want you to go in a noise room, bend that together and hammer it so that it's a nice tight bend. Then we're going to clamp it in the vise. I'm going to use my little bench vise to show you. But go in the noise room, clamp it in a big vise. Then we're going to grab the two loose ends with a set of vice grip pliers. And you need to really clamp this tightly and make sure you get both wires. And we're just going to give it a good twist, either clockwise or anti-clockwise, it doesn't really matter. And one thing you do have to do is that you have to make sure that the wires are annealed, otherwise it's not going to twist. Yeah, this one's fighting me. There we go. And you can see it's twisting fairly easily. Nice tight twist. If it isn't the same end to end, take it out of the vise, flip it over and work from the other end. So now that we have a nice twist, we're going to roll it through the rolling mill, which is over here. So what we're going to do is open the rolling mill right up and put the whole bit of twisted metal in. Once it goes all the way in, gently bring it down just with your fingers to get the thickness. Take it out, give the rolling mill one turn. Run the metal through, one more turn. Turn number 3. So now we have a nice twisted wire that's been flattened. You don't want to go too thin, or where it crosses, where the wires cross, it'll actually get to the point where it's too thin and it'll break. What we want to do now is saw through the wire where the twist is. Because I still have my vise here, I'll use it instead of my bench pin peg. So we're just going to saw right through here. Now, because this wire is really worked it's really hardly worked at this moment, so it's quite tense. Don't anneal it now, because you need to hold it in the vise to be able to untwist it. So you grab the end, either end. I normally use a set of parallel jaw pliers. See if I can show you what I'm doing here. And to just unwind it. So I just grab the two of them and just start unwinding it until I get it to the point where I can do it with my fingers. This has a really nice shape now. Okay. Now what we want to do is bend this around into a bangle, but because it is so worked at the moment, it needs to be annealed. So we'll do that. So I'm using a pumice annealing pan, the pumice because it reflects the heat back to the metal. And because it's a lot of metal, I'm going to crank the flame up. I would suggest that you go into the casting room and use the big torch in there. You'll be a lot quicker. You can see I'm running the flame at a fairly steep angle along the length of the wire. That's so that the flame actually goes farther along. If I were straight like this, I'd be just doing a little section at a time. So bring it right up to a dull red. So you can see with the light out that it is a dull red. Quench it. This is just water. So now we can handle it. So I've dried the metal off, and at this point we're going to form it around a bracelet mandrel. We'll just use a round one and a rawhide hammer. And because it is annealed, it'll be really soft at this point. So what we want to do at this point is get the pattern so that it matches. So we just bend the thing over, and where this curve comes this way, the other curve goes the other way, and I'm going to cut it there. Now when we cut it, we're going to get rid of all of the ugly marks that we put on it with our pliers when we were twisting it. this point, we want to make sure that this meets up very nicely. Then we'll take it back over and solder that join. Don't worry about it being round at this point. Just make sure that the pattern is continuous when you solder it. This is a fairly large chunk of metal. Don't worry too much at this point, other than just flexing the join. And we'll take about 3 bits of hard solder. And what I want to do is let that sit there. I'll heat the join until the flex goes clear. Then I'll pick this up on my solder pick and place it where I want it. So fairly big flame once again, because it is a big chunk of metal. So I've got a fairly good sized blob of solder on my solder pick at the moment. And I'll just bring this up to temperature. And I'm just keeping the flame on the 2 ends here, brushing it back and forth so they both come up to the same temperature. And we just bring it up until the flux goes clear. Once the flux goes clear like this, we know it's really close to being soldering temperature. So I'm placing the solder on the join with my solder pick, and it's flowed through the joint. Quench it and pickle it at this point. Now this is pickled, and because there are so many different little angles on this wire from us twisting it and then rolling it through the rolling mill, it's almost impossible to clean up with a file. So what I use is a small abrasive wheel, which is roughly the same as 400 grit sandpaper on the handpiece. So then I'm just going to make this so the various surfaces come together so it's not quite so obvious. Basically we want an invisible join if we can get one. So once we've tidied all that up, onto the bracelet mandrel and use the rawhide hammer. And as you're hammering using the rawhide, fit it on you from time to time to make sure it's the right size, because it'll just keep getting bigger as you hammer. It'll just straighten these curves out, keep getting bigger. If it's not big enough with the rawhide and you can't get it to move anymore, then we'll use a planishing hammer. And because this would make a really annoying noise on the video recorder, I won't do it. But all you're going to do is use the flat side of the planishing hammer and hammer it like we did our other bangles. Now when you have it to your satisfaction, I would just chuck it into the vibrating tumbler. I wouldn't polish this on the Tripoli. You can if you want to, but put it on a wooden bracelet mandrel.